What we're going to talk about is identifying capacity blockages. So that is what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. So first, what is a capacity blockage? Basically, it's a bottleneck in the practice, a limiting factor. You can think of it like the weakest link in the chain, and the practice will grow to that point and then basically stop until you find it. Now, there's three different types of blockages. So they're different. Each one's different. So you got the hygiene blockage, you got the doctor or operative blockage, right? Restorative, and then you got new patient blockages. So we're going to cover, sorry, we're going to cover all three today, and we're going to just identify them. So unfortunately, we don't have the time to cover how to fix them. That would probably take all day. Three different types. There's hygiene, there's doctor blockages, there's new patient blockages. Each practice is going to run into one of these at some point in your growth, right? And I would say the majority probably of you have one of these going on right now. So when we go in and consult, this is kind of the first thing we look at is to find out if there's a blockage. And I would say 80% of the time, the offices will have one of these types of blockages in the practice that is limiting its growth. Okay. Oops. So why is it so important to find? I think I mentioned that it means if you don't find it, the practice will stop growing. That's that simple. So it is like the thing we hunt for is blockages, right? And so it is, I guess, half the battle is finding out what's wrong, right? And the blockage is, as a practice starts to grow, it starts putting pressure on certain systems and certain parts of the practice, and it'll bump against a blockage, and then that's it. Practice will stop growing, and you can get stuck there for a decade. I've seen, people get stuck in this position for 15 years because they didn't identify a blockage. So what a blockage is really just it's the practice telling you it wants to grow, right? So if you don't spot this, it's over. There's no growth left in the practice. Okay. Now they can be incredibly hard to find. Okay. So what I'm saying here is the easy blockages you kind of figure out on your own, right? And you kind of fix them and you kind of are able to spot them. But as you grow and grow and grow, you kind of get to the ones that are silent. They're not obvious, right? And so it kind of just stays in this position for a long time. It can be years and years and years. Why is this not? Okay. It can take me months of tracking stats to even spot a blockage. So it's not something that we can just go in and identify right away and just go, okay, here's your blockage, fix this, fix that. No, it takes months and months of tracking a lot of times. I can spend 6 months with a client and kind of grinding and working on and tracking stats before the blockage is identified. Now I'm going to go through with you guys how to identify these blockages. So this tool is something I do at the beginning of every month is take a look at specific stats that will highlight if you've got a blockage or not. So you're gonna have to bear with me because it's a little difficult kind of to explain. That's kind of why I put slideshow together to kind of organize my thoughts, because I've tried to explain this to people before and it's a little difficult. I think I did a pretty good job. So if there's any questions, please ask at the end, all right? So first what we do is at the start of every month, we look at the stats of the practice. So this is a great time to do this because May 1st is coming up on Thursday, I think. So what you want to do is on Thursday, take a look of what is booked in the practice for the whole month of May, right? So most software will give you that number pretty easily. Some won't. It's pretty frustrating, the ones that don't. And so you're going to have to go in and add it all up. But I'm telling you, this is so important that you do this, okay? And you should do it every month, okay, to find out what your starting point is. So we know that 20% of the month is already kind of on the book, right? It's going to be hygiene, is already going to be there. So, and it's roughly 20% in most practices, but you can do the math on your own practice. What percentage of your practice is hygiene? And so you can just kind of know, okay, if I look at May, I know 20% of May is already going to be booked of hygiene, right? It's not restorative. Okay. So I'm going to take an example of a practice where the goal is 100,000 a month. And for sake of math, so that we can do this easily as percentages and stuff, we know 20,000 of it's probably going to be hygiene on this scenario. Okay. Because that's 20%. That means 80,000 needs to be added as restorative treatment, or I guess it could be some soft tissue management or scaling and root planing. Sorry, that needs to be added to be able to hit this goal, right? So that's pretty simple. So when you start the month off, or the way I want you to think of it is that there's 4 weeks roughly in every month, right? So we know if we're doing $80,000 a month in restorative treatment every month, that roughly 20,000 a week should be added on average every week, right? Everybody get what I'm saying? Okay. So if you just kind of if you take the 20,000 and then you should have added 20,000 as you get closer and closer to May. You should, from the week before, as you get close, kind of the end of April, 20,000 should be spilling over into May, right? Okay. So so that's roughly 40% should be on the book. You follow me? Should be on the book as you start May. Now, you should be a little overbooked because that would be kind of a lean and mean practice. It's kind of like, uh, you know, going to the grocery store or getting your meat and not having a refrigerator. You're eating it before it goes bad. That's pretty a lean and mean number, and that's not a healthy number actually. So you want to be a little overbooked as a doctor, right? And what that looks like is somewhere around 50 to 60% to goal when you start the month. That is a healthy number, okay? That tells me that you're kind of in buoyancy, right? Kind of Greg used to always talk about, he did a little scuba diving, and he used to talk about the regulator that keeps you perfectly buoyant, where you're not going rising and you're not falling. Okay. This number is buoyant, meaning the practice is not bubbling with signs of growth or anything, but it's also it's not sagging either. It's just a normal, healthy number to hit your goal. Okay. Now, if you're below that number, but you still hit your goal every month, meaning as you track this stat and you're constantly at 40%, 39%, 42%, 44%, 35%, but by the end of the month, you always kind of hit your goal, your focus should really be on getting more patients into the practice. Okay, your problem is not a capacity problem. It is a patient flow problem. You need more. You're very efficient is the point. Okay. And so you really need this kind of practice really needs to focus on building out hygiene, getting more new patients into the practice. Okay. So it's not a capacity blockage. If you're below 50%, but struggle to hit the goal every month, it's a pain. You don't do it every month. It seems hard. And yeah, and maybe 50% of the time you hit it, if the stars align, maybe you go over it some, but it's tough, right? And kind of get this feeling like it's not easy to hit that goal. So there two problems could be, okay? It could be a case acceptance issue, but it also could be flow. That means having enough patients in the practice, right? So we talked about this before, but you should do this math, right? So your hygiene production. So if you've got one, let's do a scenario. You got one column of hygiene, right? And that's 4 days a week, 16 days a month, and let's say it's producing $1,000 a day. Let's call it 15,000, right? And if we're getting 20 new patients a month at $1,000 a new patient, so we add those two numbers together, we get 35. And then and we take that one column and you multiply that 16 uh, times 2,500. I'll tell you why these numbers are so important in a minute. That only gives you like, I think it's 40, 30, 75,000. So it means what's in the practice is short of your goal, right? And that's a problem. That means you need more patients, right? Regardless if you're hitting the goal or not, okay? Now, if you take the same scenario and you got two columns of hygiene, you're getting 40 new patients a month, and you add up all these numbers again, you're going to see a number over 100, and it'll be 120 or 130,000 a month, right? And if you're still struggling to hit goal, it's a case acceptance issue. Okay. Now these numbers are rules of thumb, but you should know these numbers for your practice. Okay. Let me go over it. So a lot of practices, hygiene will produce 1,200 a day, 1,500 a day, some it's 1,000 a day. There's a number that your practice hits, and it should be at least 1,000 a day. Okay, in hygiene. As far as new patients go, new patient value on the month that they're seen should be over $1,000 per new patient seen. This includes all the net zeros. I have practices that's way north of that, but this is a minimum. Okay, so just your average general practice should be able to hit that per new patient. Okay, and then what comes out of hygiene, this is the restorative dentistry that comes out of your existing patients. Now, 1,500 per day should be scheduled out of the column, per column. Okay, so let's say you got a column of hygiene, and if you looked at how much dentistry came out of that column that day, should be roughly $1,500 should be scheduled out of it. Now you can't look at it each day. You got to kind of look at it over a week because it ebbs and flows, obviously. But over kind of a week or two, that's the number that should be booked straight out of hygiene. Why it's not 1,500 is that you get emergency patients that are existing patients that call in, and then of course people do treatment, as we track them down. And so this is kind of the number you can expect that comes out of hygiene every month per day. If you have 16 days of hygiene, it's 40,000. Okay, kind of set your watch to it. So if you do your math and your goal is 100,000, and after you do this little analysis, you come up with 80, it means you've got a patient flow issue. You need more patients. If you do the math and you're getting 110, 120, but you're only doing 100, right? You've got a case acceptance issue. So that is obviously, we've covered that before, but I just want to cover it again because it is important. Okay. So these are not, obviously, when you're below this 50%, you don't have a capacity issue, right? You either have a flow issue, not enough patients, or a case acceptance issue. If you're above 60% to goal or higher, you have a capacity blockage. This is what we're looking for. Now, when we do this with practices, it's pretty common to see that they're already 70, 80% to goal on May 1st for that month. And the question I ask you is, why didn't we do some of that in April? Why are we so booked out? Okay, that means you got a capacity blockage. That is the sign right there. Okay, so when you do this analysis, this is what you're looking for, is that the schedule starts booking out and starts booking out. So as the practice starts to grow, this is the number you want to look at, and this is the sign you've got a capacity blockage in your practice. Okay, so what does that mean, right? Capacity blockage. It can mean speed, obviously doctor clinical speed. It could be scheduling. It could be space. A lot of times, lack of operatories. Could be equipment. Uh, could be lack of doctors. It's time to expand and add another doctor. Could be not enough DAs, not enough people at the front desk. Uh, and identifying exactly what that is obviously case by case. But the most important thing is to identify you've got a blockage, that we need to be more efficient. Somehow we're not being efficient on the restorative side. Okay. You should not start the month off at 70% to goal. Okay. All right. So again, capacity blockages start showing up when you're at 60% to goal or higher when you start the month. Okay. What the problem is sometimes could be millions of dollars to fix is the problem. So when you get into a space issue and you've run out of space and you are landlocked, it can cost millions of dollars to fix the capacity issue. Now, whether you want to do that or not just kind of depends on your particular situation. And at that point, when you're landlocked, you want to look at how to increase the case size. So a lot of you get in this scenario where, hey, I'm not going to build out, I'm not going to move, anything like that. And I see what you're talking about. We're always at 70, 80%. What do I do for growth? Doesn't mean growth's off the table. At this point, you really want to look at kind of larger cases. How do you get bigger cases into the practice? Somehow, some way. So you can do that through all different kinds of ways, but one of them is just better case acceptance. So going from $1,000 per new patient to $1,500 a new patient can definitely help. But then obviously there's adding other services. There's implants. It's all kinds of different things that you can add to kind of bring that number up, that case, your case average up. Okay. So this is how you identify capacity blockage on the doctor side. Okay. The next one is new patient blockages. This one is common, very common. Okay. New patient blockage is a little easier to explain and a little easier for you to identify. It's the same formula. So you're going to start the month off in May 1st. How many new patients are on the book for May? Okay. And again, some software just gives you that number right away. Some don't. And so you got to go through and count. Go through and count. Okay. If you got a capacity blockage, you guys know, I've probably talked about this in the past. If you're doing any marketing at all and you start getting a capacity blockage where new patients are being pushed out a week or so, you're going to start seeing a lot of no-shows. You're going to see a lot of callers call and say, oh, let me check my schedule. I'll call you back. All these problems start showing up when you have this new patient blockage that you don't know you have. And marketing stops working. You stop getting all these no-shows. Patients call and they don't schedule. So you look at the book and see what's on the book. So there's 4 weeks to a month again, right? So if we divide that up, 25% of the new patients are calling every week, right? So what we should have roughly 30% to goal. So if you're averaging 100 new patients a month, as you start May 1st, you should have around 30 on the book. Okay. Anything more than that starts to scream capacity blockage. Why didn't we see them last month? Okay. There's another number you need to track, especially if you're marketing. You should be hovering between 25, 30%, somewhere in that zone. And again, you should be tracking this every month. Where are we starting the months off at? Okay. Again, this one's super easy to explain, but it reveals a lot. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if you're above 30%, that is a capacity blockage for new patients. It needs to be dealt with. Your team will lie to you is the problem. So when I go in, I used to go in years ago and say, how long does it take a new patient to get in? So we can get them in tomorrow. We got Tomorrow, the next day, we got holes here and there, we can get them in whatever. The problem is those holes don't line up with the patient's schedule. And so that doesn't really matter. All that matters is what's reality. How far are each patient being booked out? And our goal is around 3 days or less. So if you're doing marketing and you're spending a lot of money in marketing, this number you want to definitely look at every month. And how do you fix it? So usually we don't have a problem getting them in on the doctor's side. So with emergency patients, limited exams, that's usually not a bottleneck. That's not usually a capacity blockage. Not usually. Sometimes it is, okay? And roughly a third of your callers will be limiteds. Okay, so that's a rough estimate, but in most areas, that's what ends up happening. About 30, let's say 30%. Okay, 70% are going to be comprehensives. Not comprehensive is the way you're thinking, probably like, oh, they want restorative dentistry. No, they want to go into hygiene, the vast majority. Now there's a small percent that are looking for restorative, that are outside of those emergency patients, that 30% I talked about. So the comprehensives, they're hygiene patients. So if you have a capacity blockage in hygiene, this can back up your new patient flow into the practice. And that is super common. Like this is the most common thing that we see. And so how do you fix that? Well, one is you could add more hygiene, right? But then, a lot of you are landlocked. You can't add more. They'd be stealing a restorative op. So the only good answer to that is blocking the schedule in hygiene for new patients. And this is incredibly difficult to get your team and your hygienist to do and honor, is to hold those blocks. So first rule is, okay, so if we got 100 new patients a month, right? We know if 30% of them are going to be limited. So they're not going to be wanting a hygiene visit. So we know 70 are going to want a hygiene visit. So we should, on the book, if we're having this capacity blockage, we should put 60 or 70 blocks in hygiene for new patients. Okay. Now, it's easy to do 6 months from now. Doesn't solve the now problem. So what you have to do is have somebody come in every day and hunt for new openings on the schedule as people call and change their appointments, a week from now. As they get their texts and everything, they call and that appointment opens up, they got to go in and grab it and put a new patient block in. Now, and typically, most practices start to loosen up 2 or 3 months down the road. And so we can start putting blocks in and we don't kind of have to do it, the week before. We can start putting blocks out around 3 months before without a problem. But to get there, you have to start hunting for blocks today for like next week. Okay. So the other thing that happens is hygienists will take those blocks and they'll do scalings and they'll just take regular patients. They'll do all kinds of things. So you've got to kind of read them the riot act that these appointments are sacred. You can't take these appointments. Number 2 point to this is you want to reserve good time slots, the best time slots when new patients want to come in, the most appealing times of the day. So this would be the 8 o'clocks, the 9 o'clocks. This would be the 4 o'clock appointments. And if you're open later, the 5 o'clock appointments. This is what you'd want to block off. You don't want to block off new patient blocks at 2 in the afternoon when nobody wants to come in anyways. So, because you'll run into the same problem. Yeah, we've got openings, but people are still scheduling out. Okay, so this you want to pay attention to. That's kind of a quick, I gave you a little tutorial on how to fix it. It can be a little bit more complicated than that, and you'll get a little pushback from your team for sure. I'm doing this, okay? And you've got to keep on watching that. And then adjust your blocks accordingly. So if you got too many, start releasing some. you got too few, start creating some. And you kind of use this as your rule of thumb, this 30% to get you into the right zone, okay, of how many blocks you typically will need. All right, last one, hygiene capacity. This one is probably probably the most common, and this problem creates a problem in new patients, just like I talked about. So many of you are booked out, okay? So first thing to do is look at how far are you booked out, right? This is different than it falling apart the day of, the day before, 2 days before, right? So look out 5 business days ahead, and is it relatively full? Then look 2 weeks out. Is it relatively full? Look 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 5 weeks out. Kind of find out where it starts to trickle off, where the demand kind of demand curve, I guess, kind of falls off. Okay. So some of you, it'll be next week. It's kind of open, you know. Some of you, it'll be a month. Some of you will be booked out 6 months. I got practices that can't get their recalls in, and they're booking the recalls 7 and 8 months from when they just were in the office. So massive capacity blockage in hygiene. Okay. So this is a rule of thumb that if hygiene is booked out a month and a half, you can add 1 day a week to hygiene. Okay. So, and you want to stay ahead of this. If you've got the operatories in the space, you want to make sure that you're growing hygiene. Okay. And you want to be okay if, you know, when you add a hygienist to the practice, that that they're just breaking even in the beginning. So if you add a hygienist and they're breaking even, call that a win. Because remember what I told you comes out of hygiene? For every column of hygiene is $2,500. So adding a column of hygiene 1 day a week for the month, and if it fills up, what's the number? It's $10,000. The practice will grow by without effort. It'll be easy. Plus the hygiene hours. So $1,000 an hour, that's 14, it'll be 14, $15,000 of practice will grow when you add that to the practice. Okay. You're booked out 3 months, you can add 2 days of hygiene. You booked out 6 months, you can get away with adding a full-time hygienist. Okay. The part about it being falling apart day of, this is what stops a lot of you from wanting to expand hygiene. Okay, when you hear what I just said, you go, yeah, I would do that, but hygiene falls apart every day and it's not full by the end of the day. Okay, that's a separate problem that we'll talk about, but that's hygiene coordination. It has nothing to do with your demand. The demand is there. Okay, it's about, there's a couple things you have to do. One is retrain your patients. So what you say to them when you schedule them is important. So what the hygienist says and the communication that she has with that patient before they leave is important to create urgency, I guess, in making that appointment 6 months from now and creating a commitment that they'll be there. Okay, so there's scripting for that we use. Okay, to retrain your patient base. The other thing is how hygiene coordination is done in general. In most offices, it's done horribly. They kind of just depend on the software. They've gotten used to that as a crutch, the Weave or Medento, whatever, texting out, and it's poorly managed nowadays. And so I've seen a lot of problems with hygiene falling apart day of because the team is just generally just kind of relying on the software, and then they call the patient the day before or 2 days before, the ones that didn't confirm, and it's just guaranteed for failure if you're calling patients the day before that didn't respond to your text. So what I would do in this scenario, if you're having problems, whenever that text goes out, the next day you should be calling the people that did not respond to that text. We recommend about a week for the confirmation text to go out, not 2 weeks. So a lot of software will allow you to confirm 2 weeks out. It's too far. People kind of forget about the appointment. So we like about a week out that they confirm, and then your team is calling those patients that aren't confirmed the day after. And they give it a couple days, and then they what we do if it's really bad is we let the patient know that if we don't hear back from you by the end of business day, we'll have to give this appointment to somebody else. And we'll text them that as well. And we get super aggressive in making sure hygiene is filled because, like I said, each patient that strolls through hygiene is valuable on the restorative side as well. Okay. So, all right. That is capacity in a nutshell. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to go into a lot of detail on how to fix this stuff, but this will kind of give you a general overview so that you can spot your own problems. You can diagnose essentially your own practice if it's got a capacity blockage. Any questions? Dr. Smurthway, you got to have a question. You're frozen. You got to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No, it's fun to hear your voice and talking about capacity and all these fundamental principles of long era development that I started 15 years ago.
Yeah, they're fundamental, and you fix them, and then the practice grows, and then another one shows up is what happens, and you just got
Yeah.
to stay ahead of it. And the way you can do it, like I said, is just look at your stats at the beginning of the month. It reveals a lot, and you
Yeah.
kind of always stay ahead of it. Okay.
Hmm. I
Any
get it.
anybody with a question? Does everybody understand the math that I did earlier? I know it's a little complicated and convoluted, I guess. Everybody get it? All right, so May 1st, take a look at your stats and see where you fall. It'll tell you what to do with your practice, really. Okay? And do that breakdown that I told you about what patients are worth. How many columns of hygiene you've got multiplied by 2,500, multiply new patients by, now if you're if you do a lot of bigger cases in your practice, you can multiply a new patient by 1,500. Okay. But if you're just a general practice that does some bigger cases, but not a ton, you want to stick with 1,000. And especially if you have associates, you want to stick with 1,000 to 1,200 in that zone. Okay. For most of you, that's what I would recommend. And just do the math and see what your practice, what is the flow telling you should be producing. Okay. And I'll just tell you what your next move is. All right. All right. That's what I had for you. Okay. All right. See you guys. All right. Have a good day.